Tim Davie and Deborah Turness resign amid BBC controversy. A moment of responsibility and reflection, the BBC has lost two of its top leaders. Tim Davie, the Director General, and Deborah Turness, the head of news, have both resigned. Their departures come after weeks of criticism and public scrutiny. At the heart of the controversy is a Panorama documentary about former U.S. President Donald Trump. The documentary was accused of editing his speech in a misleading way. Critics said it made Trump appear to encourage the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. In reality, the parts of his speech that were shown together were spoken more than 50 minutes apart. The "fight like hell" comment, highlighted in the edit, was about alleged election corruption. It was never directly linked to urging people to storm the Capitol. This episode has sparked a deeper question about trust, truth, and responsibility. The BBC, a venerable institution with decades of reputation, faced a moment of reflection. How do we report the world honestly? How do mistakes affect millions who rely on news? For Davie and Turness, the answer was to step aside. Turness said the controversy had reached a stage where it was damaging the BBC, an institution she loves. She acknowledged mistakes, but firmly rejected the idea that the BBC is institutionally biased. Davie, in his statement, did not name the documentary, but said that ongoing debates around BBC News contributed to his decision. He emphasized that while the BBC has successes, leaders must take ultimate responsibility for mistakes. Tim Davie has been at the helm since 2020. He had faced many crises, from controversies over Gary Lineker to coverage of international events, but he had endured. Some called him Teflon Tim because scandals seemed not to stick. But this latest controversy gained momentum. It arrived at a sensitive time, with the government set to review the BBC's Royal Charter, which is the legal foundation of its existence. By resigning now, Davie hopes to allow a new Director General to enter with a clean slate, to guide the BBC into the next chapter of its history with calm and thoughtful leadership. Deborah Turness led BBC News and Current Affairs since 2022. She oversaw a vast team of nearly 6,000 people, broadcasting to 500 million viewers worldwide in more than 40 languages. Her experience included roles as president of NBC News and CEO of ITN. Yet, even with such experience, the weight of responsibility sometimes requires personal sacrifice. She stepped down not because she failed, but because she chose the institution over herself. In her words, "The buck stops with me." It is a reminder that leadership is not about avoiding blame, but carrying it with dignity when the moment demands it. The Panorama documentary itself became a mirror for the BBC to examine its own practices. Critics argued that the edit distorted events and left viewers questioning the BBC's credibility. Michael Prescott, a former external advisor to the BBC's Editorial Standards Committee, wrote in an internal memo that the documentary could make people ask, "Why should the BBC be trusted?" It was a moment that forced reflection on how media shapes perception, how careful journalists must be, and how responsibility cannot be delegated. At the same time, the BBC faces other challenges. There are questions about coverage on international conflicts, like the Gaza war, and coverage of social issues, like trans rights. Even a live news script alteration earlier this year sparked 20 impartiality complaints. In many ways, these controversies are not isolated events. They reflect a broader tension in journalism, the balance between speed, clarity, audience expectation, and ethical responsibility. In resigning, Davie and Turness leave behind a lesson in leadership. They demonstrate that sometimes the right choice is not to cling to power, but to create space for renewal. Their resignations are not only about mistakes made, but about a philosophy of accountability. That institutions like people thrive when honesty and reflection come first. The BBC board will now appoint a new Director General, who will inherit both the challenges and the opportunity to restore trust and shape the next Royal Charter. In this episode, we see a fundamental truth. Leadership is never easy, truth is never simple, and trust, once shaken, must be nurtured with care. For the BBC, for journalism, and for all who depend on information to understand the world, this is a moment to pause, reflect, and recommit to integrity.